Hey guys, we're back with part 3 of the 8.5 notes. I'm going to be color coding a lot of things today, so if you have 3 colors of highlighters or colored pencils or something that would help you sort this out, please go ahead and grab them now. I'm going to have you pause the screen and copy what you see, and then we'll get started. Perfect. Okay, so a couple vocabularies. We're just refreshing. You already have these. So solutions, roots, x-intercept, zeros. Remember, those are what we're talking about when we say answers to a polynomial. It may or may not be where it crosses the x-axis. Okay, a double root would be tangent to the x-axis. That's anytime you have 2 of the same factor. Remember, that's what it looks like if it bounces off the x-axis. It does not cross it. An imaginary root would still exist. It just wouldn't touch the x-axis. And 4 things that we can definitely get from our degree, which is that highest exponent, is the name of our function, how many total solutions it has, the maximum number of turns it would have. Remember, that's a maximum. It's not necessarily how many it does have, and the end behavior shape. Okay, so we're going to be color coding a lot of things in yellow, and that's what we're getting from that degree. Okay. For instance, if I just kind of recall up here for you, just knowing the highest exponent in this is 3x to the 7th, tells us the degree is 7. That's 7 zeros. They may be real, they may be imaginary. That would give us a maximum of 6 turns, and that would tell us the shape of our graph is going to be going something in this direction. Okay? Same thing for the second one. Just knowing this main degree of 5, highest exponent is 5, degree is 5, tells us the name is going to be kinetic, tells us the number of solutions, 5, could be real, could be imaginary. Maximum turns would be 4, that's 1 less. And it tells us our end behavior, again, is going to look something like this. Okay? Both of those have a positive leading coefficient. Remember, if they did have a negative, it would switch it to kind of this direction. Okay? All right, let's go ahead and move on. Again, I'm going to pause at the beginning and end of every question so you can write things down. So if you would, I'm going to have you pause the screen. If you want to get kind of everything color-coded, that'd be a good place to start. Everything we can get from the degree is going to be yellow or orange. Everything we get from the constant out of the equation is going to be pink. The only new information we're talking about right now is how to find the zeros, and that's going to require some factoring. Okay? If you need to pause, do it now. Perfect. All right, so I'm going to be writing in black because everything's already color-coded. Let's start with A. A tells us everything that we can do in yellow from that highest degree of 3. So I know right now the name is cubic, the degree is 3, total roots is 3, maximum number of turns is 2, because remember that's 3 minus 1, so it's 1 less. And the end behavior, because it's got a positive leading coefficient of 1, that means my end behavior is when x goes positive, f of x goes positive. And when x goes negative, f of x goes negative. Whoops. X goes negative. Okay? All right, so we know right now my graph is facing this way and this way. We know it has 3 roots, may or may not cross the y or the x-axis 3 times. We don't know that yet. Okay. All right. Y-intercept is going to come from that constant out at the end. My y-intercept is going to be 3. I could go ahead and put a little 3 on here. 1, 2, 3. But everything else that I'm getting as far as where my graph is going to curve is going to come from that 0. Now, I did make a little note on here. We are going to have to factor. So if factoring is not a strength of yours, I highly, highly encourage we get on the practice train ASAP. I also encourage that you start using a calculator when you're doing the practice problems to make sure that what you are getting matches what you had. Okay? And I'll show you what I mean by that. So let's start with this one. I have 4 terms, so I'm always going to check and see if I can factor by grouping to start. So if I check out these first guys, I can pull out an x squared. And I would be left with an x minus 3. Let's check with these guys. I can pull out, let's see, a minus 1 would still make it an x minus 3. All right, I'm going to kind of walk this a little bit over here. But my x squared and my minus 1 are going to make my first factor, x squared minus 1. And then this x minus 3 that's the same, that's going to be my second factor. Remember, I only write it once. Now, that's beautiful and factored. It's just not all the way factored because this is a difference of squares, which means I can break it into x minus 1 and x plus 1. And then I would keep my x minus 3. Okay. All right. Looking at this, That matches us having 3 roots, right? It tells me I'm going to have 3 different ones. They're all different, so no double roots. But I'm going to have this guy makes a -1. Oops, let me go the other way with that. This guy makes the -1. This guy makes a +1. And this guy makes a +3. So those are the 3 places that I'm going to cross the x-axis. So let's go ahead and get those on here. So -1, 1, 2, 3, +1, +3. From there, that is all that I need to decide my shape. I know that I'm going to be going up in this direction. I know that I'm going to be going down in this direction, so I can move my arrow a little bit. But we are going to hit a basic curve of just this. Nothing fancy. I don't care where the turnaround is right here. I don't care if it's high or low. I just know I need to hit every point smoothly. That's it. Okay? All right, if you need to pause the screen, copy it down, do so now. We're going to the next problem. All right, so on B, again, everything I can get yellow from the degree. So I just need to know what my degree would be. Well, if I have an x leading here and an x leading here, that means my total is x to the 3rd. If I was ever going to multiply these together, I would end up with an x to the 3rd. So that means my degree is 3. Everything I can get from that. So I know it's cubic again. I know the total solutions are going to be 3. Real or imaginary, we don't know yet. The turns is going to be 1 less than that, so 2. And the in behavior, I'm going to write it long. When x goes positive, f of x goes positive. And that's because my leading coefficients, both of these are +1s on their x's, okay? So f of x goes positive. When x goes to -infinity, f of x goes negative. Okay? All right, looking at the y-intercept, this is where we get a little bit tricky because it's not written out in standard form. So I have to look at my constants, both of them. So this is multiplication, right? It's written out in factoring. So if you think about taking that +1 and multiplying it with that -6, my y-intercept would come out to be a -6. If it was something other than a +1 in that first parentheses, then it would not be just coincidentally the second number, okay? It has to be the multiplication of all of the constants in factored form. We'll see some more of that in a minute, okay? All right, next thing I notice is that this is not completely factored, so I do need to keep factoring it. I got lucky that one of these is already done, so I'm going to kind of walk him over here. I have x plus 1 is already factored. But this guy is going to have to factor into 2 pieces because I know I'm looking for 3 zeros. So if I'm thinking what can multiply to make a -6, add to a -1, I'm thinking x minus 3 and then x plus 2. Okay? All right, those making my factors helps me know what my zeros are. Make sure you change the signs. We are going to use a -2, a -1, and a +3. We're all changing signs, and I'm also writing them least to greatest, okay? All right, so if I use that now, let's go -6 on my y-axis. I'm going 3 on the x-axis, -2 and -1, and then we already know my in behavior is going to go in this direction. So right now, I am ready to go ahead and start connecting those. Doesn't really matter as long as you hit every dot the way you said you have to. So they have to be crosses and I have to go smoothly through every point. Okay? Pause the screen if you need to. Go ahead and write what you missed. We're going to the next. All right, so for C and D, we're doing the exact same thing. If you wanted to take a second and kind of get those color-coded, you could. If not, we're ready to get started. Okay, so C is in standard form, which means that if I just look at the highest exponent, I can get a lot of information. I know my name is going to be quartic. Quad is 4, so quartic. The degree is 4. Number of zeros total is going to be 4. Could be real, could be imaginary. We don't know. Maximum number of turns is 1 less, so 3. And remember to the 4th power, because that's even, they're both going to be going in behavior in the same direction. Since this is a positive leading coefficient, I know that my x's, no matter which way they go, positive or negative, are going to have both positive y values. So both positive f of x. So both of these are going to go to positive infinity. Okay, that means we're going up this way and up this way. Perfect. All right, y-intercept, we are in standard form, like I said, so we can go ahead and just take that y-intercept as a 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And from here, we are going to have to factor, okay? All right, we can factor this guy the same way as if we were going to factor this. The only difference is we have to be aware that instead of x and x, it's going to be x squared and x squared. So let me walk you through that real quick. All right, so let's say we're saying what would multiply to make 4 add up to a negative 5? That would be an x minus 1 and an x minus 4, except now they're not x and x. They're x squared and x squared. Both of these are a difference of squares, so both of them are going to split. So we're going to have an x minus 1, x plus 1, and then an x minus 2, x plus 2. And I can show you real quick how to check these on a calculator. Let's say this is your original and you wanted to see if what you got first made sense. Let me move this real quick. Okay, turn this guy off. All right, let's say we had x to the 4th minus 5x squared plus 4. Now, you're not going to get to use this on a test or on the quiz because it's going to be non-calculator, but based on the direction of where this shape is, I can check my next factor answer. So we said x squared minus 1 and x squared minus 4. See how it lands exactly on it? If you had forgotten the squareds, like if you had just done x minus 1, x plus 1, let me show you why it would look different. See how that's totally different graph? We needed the squares to make it work. Okay, from there, if I wanted to factor this and know if I could go farther, I could check it. I could do x minus 1, x plus 1, x minus 4, or sorry, 2, and x plus 2. And if it still comes out exactly the same shape, that's how I know I've done this correctly. All my answer lines match the original, okay? All right, let me go ahead and bring this guy back. We are now ready to go ahead and put our zeros on here and get our graph going. So my zeros, changing the signs and putting them in order, we are going to go a -2, a -1, a +1, and a +2. So let's zoom in real quick and hit those real quick. So we're going to hit all of these points, okay? Now, we know that a quartic kind of looks like a W if it's facing up. And we know that we have to cross every one of those points. So this up here is going to be the tip of my W, but I don't really care right now how far down it goes behind that. So I'm going to move my arrow a little bit tighter. Same thing here. I'm going to move him a little bit tighter. And we're going to go like this. Just cross, up, touch, cross, and come up. Okay? If you did yours like this, there's nothing wrong with that. Doesn't matter how far up and down you go, just make sure you're hitting all the critical points, okay? All right, we are done with C. If you need to pause and copy, do that now. We're going to the next. All right, again, we're in standard form for D, so I want to check out my highest exponent. I got a 3 here. That means we're cubic again. Degree of 3. Number of solutions is 3. Could be real, could be imaginary. We don't know yet. Maximum number of turns is 2. It's 1 less than that. In standard form, we know what our y-intercept is. He's going to be a -8. And I know that since my leading coefficient is is positive, and we are an odd function, then as my x goes positive, so does my f of x. And as my x goes negative, so does my f of x go negative also. Okay? All right, so we're facing something like this still. All right, factor in this. This is a difference of cubes. So if you remember your rule for a difference of cubes, that means we are going to factor it knowing what each of those cubes are. So we have an x and a 2. Our first one is going to be the same, so x minus 2. When we move into the long parenthesis, we square the first one, so x squared. We put them together with the opposite sign, so a plus 2x. And then we square the second one, so plus 4. All right, there is no way that we can multiply to make a 4 and add up to make a 2. So in this problem, the only place I can hit is this 2 right here. Okay, and I'll show you how we can check that again. So if I move and put my calculator back, oops. Sorry about that. All right, so we're saying x raised to the 3rd minus 8. Bring it down, and I'm just doing this when we're practicing to make sure that we end up with it right. X minus 2, and then an x squared plus 4x. Oops, sorry, plus 2x plus 4. All right, black one, red one are both the exact same. You can see here that we are going to have that one solution at 2, but we are not going to have another place where it crosses because this doesn't factor anymore. Okay, so knowing that helps me make my shape. Let's go ahead and zoom over here. All right, so the only 0 I have is at 2, which means I know I need to hit at -8. And I know I need to hit at 2. Other than that, I don't really care who I hit. Okay? All right. We could kind of look at this and move it really, really tight. So I'm going to move this arrow a little bit tighter, move this arrow a little bit tighter. We could assume that it crosses down, kind of swoops through there and goes over. That would be sufficient. If you thought that it may be curved sooner, kind of like this, and then crosses at 8, that would be fine too. Oops. Sorry about that, guys. Me and this pen are disagreeing right now. There we go. All right. So that's what we're going with. If you need a second to copy the screen on D, go for it. We are moving on to E and F. So on E, F, and G, I'm actually going to kind of have you pause the screen real quick. We are not going to fill out all the blanks for those, but I am going to ask you to focus on shape, zeros, and y-intercepts because I want to make sure you can find that as a way to graph your critical points, even if you aren't being asked to fill out everything about it, okay? So you're only graphing, but it is important to know the shape, the zeros, y-intercepts. Perfect. Let's look at E. So based on this, I can kind of look at how many x's I have, and that will determine what my shape is going to be. So right here I have an x, but it's to the 2nd power, and I have another x. So total, we're looking at x to the 3rd. We are going to be cubic then, kind of facing this direction, because my leading coefficient is a positive 2, okay? Second thing I would want to know is what my zeros are. This is completely factored already. So we have a double root right here at -1, and we also have a regular root at a positive 3. Finally, my y-intercept is going to be us multiplying all of the constants. So if I kind of highlight that, that means we are multiplying a positive 1 twice, right? We have 2 of them, and a -3, and we have to multiply this 2 out front. So if we wrote that down, we're doing 2 times 1 times 1 times a -3. All right, so if I multiply that all together, I get a -6. We can graph everything we need from that, okay? So I'm going to get my y-intercept first, get my x-intercept on 3, and my double root at -1. I know that we're going up this way, and we're going down this way, and I know that I have to bounce off at that double root of -1, okay? So I am going to cross the rest of it. Let's see. So we need it to look something like cross. Ooh, I got to see if I can figure out what that one's going to look like. We need to cross at 3 and bounce at a -1. Oh, I apologize. The y-intercept's at -6. That's why I'm looking at this like that. Doesn't make any sense. All right, let's go the other way with this. Apologies. -6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, now this is a lot easier. So we are going to cross at the 3, hit the -6, bounce off that -1 because he's a double root, and then we can go down forever. So your graph should look something along the lines of this. Again, if you went down really far, came back up and bounced, that's fine too. I don't hate or like one of those any better than the other guy. Okay. All right, pause the screen if you need to. Go ahead and copy it down, and then we'll move forward. Beautiful. All right, F, talking about F. On F, let's start with the shape. So if I'm counting up all the x's that I have an x squared, and I have another x, so we're looking at to the third power. We have to be careful here, though, about our leading coefficients. This guy's positive, but this x is negative. So instead of facing this way, we have to flip it. We have to think about going this way now. Okay? My zeros, for me personally, and this may not be the way you prefer to do it, but for me personally, I kind of look at this like there's a negative in front of that x. So for me, it's helpful to switch this and then kind of pull out that negative. So for me, when I'm thinking about this to make my life easier, I'm looking at it more like this. Okay? All right, so from there, my first x right here is going to give me, let me change colors. My first x there is going to give me a 0. My second x here is going to give me that 5. You also should know that the 0 is a double root because he has a squared on him. The 5 is just a regular root. Finally, my y-intercept is us taking all of the constants. So that means I have a -5 here. That one's happening only once. And then I have times 0, because that's this one. Oops, sorry. Apologies. The negative is all I want. My bad. This guy. So times a -1. All right, that makes your y-intercept come out to be a 5. And again, while you're learning this and while you're practicing, not on a test, but while you're learning it, we can always type that in if we're unsure. Make sure we know what we're getting. So x squared and then 5 minus x. All right, so we definitely agreed that there was a double root on 0. We had an intercept at 5. And then it looks like there is not a y-intercept on 5, which makes sense because we're hitting on 0. So let me go ahead and fix that guy. So if you're crossing the x-axis at 0, that would also mean you're hitting the y-axis at 0. All right, so let's go through graphing this guy. All right, we're going to have a double root on 0, 0. We also are going to hit 5. We know our shape is going to be coming from this direction and going down this way. We're going to have a double root bouncing at 0. I don't care how high it goes up, but it has to come back down through that 5. Okay? All right, that would be the end of your graph. Perfect. Let's go ahead and move on. So looking at G. G is already completely factored for us, which makes your life so much easier. We have to count up how many x's we have. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're looking at like an x to the 4th here. X to the 4th, if it has a positive leading coefficient, is going to look something like a w. So let's look. All of these x's are coming out positive, so I definitely am going up and up. My zeros are going to be all of these with the opposite sign, so I'm going to go in order. So I'm taking a -3 from him. I'm taking a -1 from this guy, a +3, and then a +5. And my y-intercept is going to be me multiplying all of the constants together. So we've got 1, 3, -3, and -5. So 1 times 3 times -3 times -5. So -9 times -5, so we got a +45 here. All right, let's graph this guy up. Y-intercept is going to be super high. I'm just going to label this 45. I'm going to go ahead and do some tick marks here. So we're at -3, -1, +3, and +5. We know we're going to go up and up. So I just need to cross somehow, come up, hit that point, cross again, and go up to the rest of the way with my arrow. Something along these lines should be your graph. No double roots. We are good with G. If you will pause the screen, copy anything you missed, we'll move on to the next. All right, so H for A, B, and there's going to be 2 more down here on the next page. We are trying to graph something that would meet the requirements, okay? The biggest thing I want to point out is just kind of the name shape, so quadratic, thinking of what that looks like. It will tell you if it has a leading coefficient. So quadratic, we know that looks like a parabola. Positive leading coefficient means it's going up. If I look at this one, it says cubic, negative leading coefficient. So if it was positive, it would look like this. Since it's negative, it's going to look like this. Okay? And then from there, we're going to use the real roots and x-intercepts to determine how the hitting of the x-axis takes place. So if it's quadratic, it says it has 2 real roots. That means 2 whole numbers. But it also has 2 x-intercepts. So both of those have to be a cross. So cross one time, cross again. That's a graph. Okay? If it said 2 real roots, but no x-intercepts, then that wouldn't make sense because we would have to have a real if we were going to cross it. If it said no real roots, no x-intercepts, then this guy would work. If it said 2 real roots, but only 1 x-intercept, that would be a double root. It would bounce. It would hit right there. Okay? All right, so you're just trying to meet the requirements. On B, we know our general shape. It has 3 real roots. Okay, so 3 factors. But it only hits the x-axis twice. That means it has a double root somewhere. So I'm going to show you 2 different options. You could go cross and then bounce. Could go something like that. Or if you wanted another way, you could bounce on the first one. You could bounce the first time and then cross the second time. As long as you bounce once and cross once, it still works. Okay? All right, let's go to the next page. Pause if you need to copy it down. Let's go on. All right, for C and D. C and D, quartic. Again, that's 4. It has a positive leading coefficient, so we should look something like a W. This one is quintic. Remember, quintic is 5 with a negative leading coefficient, which means it's going to look something like the cubic. It's going to go up this way. It's just going to have an extra hoopty. Okay, so that would be positive. We don't want that. We want kind of the mirror of that, the negative leading coefficient. Okay. All right. 4 real zeros means it has 4 factors, but it only bumps 3 times, or it only hits 3 times, which means one of them has to be a bump. Doesn't matter which one. You could cross, bump, cross. That would work. If you wanted to bump and then cross, cross, that would be fine also. Let's look at D. D, we have 5 real zeros, but only 3 x-intercepts. That means you have 5 factors. 2 of them have to be bumps. So let's see if we can kind of roll through this. So let's go a bump, cross, cross. All right. Let's go back and see if we can try that one again. So let's do the 2 bumps first. So bump, bump, cross. So 1, 2, 3. 2 bumps and a cross. There are other ways that you could do it. You could cross first and then do 2 bumps underneath. That would work also. If you need to pause the screen, copy that down, go ahead. We're moving on to the last 3 problems. We are not going to do the I on the bottom. All right, if you would pause the screen, go ahead and copy what you see. Perfect. We're going to start with I. I does tell you that you can use a graphing calculator because I want you to see the answers on that one, the intercepts. So if I kind of move this out of the way, I've already got this one typed in. I'm just going to activate it so you can see it. All right, so if we're looking at this one, I am going to ask you to write down the 3 points that or 4 points that I click on here. It is quartic. So we're going to label those guys. I'm going to pause the screen so you can write and I can write. So we have negative 4.091, negative 0.977, 1.469, and then 4.599. Okay. All right, if you missed any of that, I am going to put it back on here. And we're going to draw the basic graph from that. So it is quartic. It does have a positive leading coefficient out here in the front. So we're going to hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to hit at about -4. We're going to hit at about -1, about 1.5, and then at about 4.5. Okay, and I'm not making this any bit super fancy. We're just going cross, 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 cross. Okay. We are doing all of that just knowing the shape, the end behavior, and where it crosses the x-axis. Okay. If you need to pause the screen, go ahead and do that now. We're going to the next one. Looking at J, it says use the graph, so they gave you the graph, to write a polynomial of least degree. Least degree means don't throw any extra x's in there that you don't need, that has rational coefficients and a leading term of 1. Okay? All right, so if we think about that, our leading term, you could just put out in the front, leading term of 1. We don't even need a 1, but just so you know. We identify all of our intercepts. So I have an intercept here on 2. I have a y-intercept at -2, and then I have a double root at -1. Remember, when you're writing factors, the signs are opposite. So our double root would be x plus 1, and we have 2 of them. And then our 2 would give us an x minus 2. I'm going to do a quick check to make sure that my y-intercept is going to come out. 1 times 1 times -2. That does match what we want. And then I can put this together. So I know that my x plus 1 gives me x squared plus 2x plus 1. And then if I FOILed this out one more time, we would multiply through with the x squared, so x to the third minus 2x squared. Distribute with the 2x gives me plus 2x squared minus 4x. And then if we multiplied finally with the 1, we would get plus x minus 2. I'm going to go ahead and combine all my like terms. So x to the third, these guys cancel, minus 3x minus 2, and that would be the equation of my problem. Okay. All right, we're going to do one more problem. If you would, go ahead and copy down what you see for k, and then we'll talk through it. All right, it says write a polynomial of least degree that has rational coefficients and a leading term of 2. So if I'm setting this up, I see I have 3 zeros. So we're going to say y equals, I'm going to put 3 sets of parentheses out here. And I know my leading term of 2. So I'm going to go ahead and put my 2 out front. Now, all of these I wrote x equals whatever they gave me. So x equals -5, x equals 0, x equals a -2i. And now in order to think about reverse factoring, we have to make those equal 0. So if I know moving this one back, you guys would have already known this. X plus 5 would be the factor that goes with him, okay? We know that the x equals 0 just means there's an x chilling by itself. But this one's a little bit dicey. What you can think about here is we know that a 2i comes from squaring something or comes from square rooting something. So if I square both sides, that means x squared equals -2 squared gives me 4. And I squared gives me a -1. So think about that like x squared equals a -4. If I move that guy back to the other side, I get x squared plus 4 equals 0. And that's what I can put into my parenthesis. So x squared plus 4. Okay. All right, I am not going to have you FOIL this all back together, but I do want us to write a final answer for him, just a little bit more simplified. We definitely would want to put that 2 and that x out in front. Your x would never be in parentheses, but we can leave it separated, x plus 5 and x squared plus 4. Okay, and that's what we'll leave it with. If you missed anything on the bottom part of this page, go ahead and pause and copy now. I know this was a long video, but good job getting through it.